It's an urgent story involving 1,000 monkeys brought into the U.S. illegally. Should they all be taken away from Charles River and sent to sanctuary here, or sent back to Asia to be brought back into the research loop with the correct paperwork? PETA is fighting for the best answer for the monkeys. The story next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights. Brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, the case of Charles River and the 1,000 monkeys. Right now, the U.S. Department of Justice and the Fish and Wildlife Service are investigating the multi-billion-dollar lab research firm Charles River for the illegal importation of monkeys. Because they were brought here in violation of U.S. regulations, the monkeys can't be used in research. They either go back to Asia, where Charles River begins the process again, with the right paperwork, with the monkeys to be bought and sold for lab research, or as PETA has advocated, the abuse of the monkeys can stop, and they can be placed in a sanctuary here, where they can live out their lives as normal macaque monkeys, not as research subjects. Lisa Jones-Engel, a PETA primatologist, helps us understand what's at stake with the 1,000 monkeys. And she sheds light on the bigger picture. The 1,000 monkey case comes just weeks after the Fish and Wildlife Service released news that they were planning to stop all importation of monkeys to the U.S. Here's my interview with PETA primatologist Lisa Jones-Engel on the PETA Podcast. A lot of news in the world of monkey importation. We had just a couple weeks ago, PETA released news that the Fish and Wildlife Service has stopped or planned to stop all importation of monkeys to the U.S. for use in laboratories. Can you explain to me what that is about? Have they stopped it? What is Fish and Wildlife doing about monkey importation?
The industry is actually who came out and said this first. Emil, the industry said that Fish and Wildlife is basically, they have put so many roadblocks now for the importers that it will be almost impossible for them to import monkeys any longer. And they're using a really a simple technique, but one that will be devastatingly protective for the monkeys. So Fish and Wildlife is requiring that the importers show that any imported monkey is actually captive bred. And the way that you do that, we know that they've been fudging paperwork, the importers, and they've been taking the collars off of dead monkeys and putting them on wild-caught monkeys. But the Fish and Wildlife is using DNA. They are requiring the importers to show that these animals are what's called F2, which is the second generation captive bred, which means that their grandparents could have been pulled from the wild. Actually, no, their great-grandparents could have been pulled from the wild, but their grandparents and their parents had to have been born in captivity. And you know what? These fetid, deadly, dangerous monkey farms in Asia, they're not going to be able to do that.
Wow, so this is another step, and we've talked about the paper trail to figure out, what monkeys are where and who has them in labs here in the United States from Asia. But this DNA, could be a game changer. Now we have the science behind it. We can tell, where the monkeys, what their origin was.
Exactly. So this is kind of a forensic DNA protocol that Fish and Wildlife is setting up. And the industry has already commented on it. And they've said it would take at least 2 years for the industry to be able to kind of get the test, the assay set up and get the testing kind of protocol in place. You know what? If it takes 2 years for them to do that, this 2-year lag should be enough to force the industry to say, all right, enough with this monkey business. We're going to pivot to non-animal tests, definitely non-monkey tests.
And if you do that as well, it would probably help replenish the monkey population in Asia, the 2-year lag?
These monkey populations in Asia have absolutely crashed. Laos is reporting virtually no monkeys left there. Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, they're all talking about monkeys are disappearing from the forest. And that is directly because this industry has been scooping them up. This 2-year lag, it'll be the kind of the breathing room that these wild populations need, because they have to start rebuilding them. The moms have to be allowed to give birth in the forest and keep their babies. And that's what this could do.
All right. So this is what Fish and Wildlife, the Fish and Wildlife Service is proposing, and that's going to cause some ruckus in the industry as we've just described. Although it's not final that they're going to do that, right? I mean, it's still in a proposal stage, right?
Well, there are so many questions. Again, this information about Fish and Wildlife shutting down importations came directly from industry. And who would know better than industry on this? The industry reported this. We magnified it, tried to get any information out of Fish and Wildlife Service. Good luck with that. There are people, obviously, we have been sending in FOIA, requests for freedom of information. I know reporters are doing the same. Fish and Wildlife doesn't want to talk because there are active civil and criminal investigations directed at these importers right now.
We have to wait and see what actually happens on that score. But in the meantime, you're trying to rescue, PETA's trying to rescue 1,000 monkeys from this, a big giant in the industry, Charles River Laboratories. And before we go into that, give us a thumbnail sketch on monkey importation in general, the scope and the width. Now, we talked about the DNA test, the verification just a few minutes ago, but just give an overall picture for our listeners on what monkey importation is like here in the U.S. and why U.S. labs are importing these monkeys, where they're coming from, and what's wrong with it.
Monkey importation it's greedy, it's dark, it's dangerous. It has existed in the shadows for decades. The industry goes in, they go into wild populations, they cut down a tree, they net the animals who are coming down, they beat the animals who are trying to fight back. Monkeys are stuffed into crates and wire bags. They're taken to these monkey farms throughout Asia. A lot of the animals die in these facilities from injuries, from disease, from just despair. The animals are then a shipper or an importer like Charles River or Innovative or Pre-Labs will place an order, and they'll say, all right, we want 1,000 long-tailed macaques. We want from this age to this age. Box them up, put them on the plane, and send them to the U.S. That starts a 48-hour odyssey of these animals being put into small crates, trucked to the airport, weighed on the tarmac, loaded into a belly of the plane, flown to the next stop. Sometimes at that next stop, the temperature will fly into Tbilisi. They'll go from the humid tropics to the cold. No one's paying attention. No one's caring for these animals. They're sick. They're screaming. They're peeing. They're pooping. They're bleeding. They show up in the U.S. Again, no one's looking. PETA we had some footage recently about the CDC, who is supposed to be looking and inspecting monkeys who come into the U.S. And we saw the inspectors literally kind of leaning back as far away as they could so that no one was looking into these cages to see whether these animals were alive. The monkeys are then dropped into trucks. They're transported to undisclosed locations throughout the U.S. to begin a quarantine period. And we know that during that quarantine period, animals are dying. They're dying of TB. They're dying of diarrheal diseases. They're coming in infected with malaria and tuberculosis and deadly bacterial diseases that are so dangerous, they're considered bioterrorism agents. This is the monkey pipeline. From beginning to end, it is misery and death. And for what? Are these animals leading to improvements in treatments in human health? No. This is a lose-lose-lose situation for everyone, for the monkey, for the importer, for the taxpayer.
And for the public, they should be concerned because these monkeys represent a threat to public health. If some of them are coming in with diseases or, and people, they get upset when they hear about Wuhan and the labs. This could be even deadlier than that.
Absolutely, because the sheer volume of animals, of monkeys that are being moved into the U.S. should be shocking to the public. 35,000 monkeys a year. In this century alone, almost 500,000 monkeys have come in. And every one of these monkeys, one of the things we learned through this indictment that happened back in November, where Initiative and Worldwide Primates were the unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators associated with the Cambodian monkey smuggling ring. We read the indictment very closely. You know what they're doing? You know how they actually do it? At the monkey farms, the veterinarians look at the animals and they, quote unquote, disqualify some animals. Disqualified is a euphemism for these animals were too sick, or they'd already died in transport, or they were infected with TB or herpes B so that they could not be shipped out. The veterinarians, according to the indictment, would take the collar off of the monkey, a wire metal collar that's attached around the monkey. They would take it off the disqualified monkey and put it on a wild monkey who had been trafficked in through the black market. And then that wild monkey, with the identity of this formerly supposedly captive bred monkey, would then get stuffed into a crate.
Wow. So you had monkeys misidentified by the monkey farmers. Yeah. And then they would take a disqualified monkey and then they would give that identity to another monkey, and the monkey would go
right.
They would be allowed to come in.
The monkeys who were too sick, too diseased to travel, their identity was taken and placed on another monkey that they knew nothing about. These are wild caught monkeys. They probably weren't even screening those animals. They were just, in this industry, the monkey is just a commodity. It's just a number. And that's why the Fish and Wildlife's focus on this DNA testing to absolutely force the industry to show that these are well captive bred. And if you're captive bred, then supposedly you are healthier. You have an impact of the wild population. But this industry, they're going to use whatever methods they can to get as many monkeys in as they can.
Well, tell me again, how big a player is Charles River in this? So you mentioned thousands of monkeys that they bring in, but they sound like a major world player.
Charles River is the world player in this industry. They're the biggest mover of monkeys in the world. So they have facilities in Cambodia, Vietnam, Mauritius. I'm sure they're getting monkeys from Indonesia, from the Philippines. Charles River doesn't just import their own. Charles River also buys from the other importers like Initiative and Worldwide Primates, who bring monkeys from overseas into the US, and then Charles River buys those monkeys once they're here. It's like the level of laundering to try to kind of scrub off the origin or the identity of these monkeys is just at every stage this is happening.
Yeah, and monkey laundering, we've used that term before, you just used it here, but that's what it is in order to get these monkeys in. Now tell me, what is PETA trying to do to get them to release 1,000 monkeys? Why this number 1,000?
A couple of weeks ago, PETA got a tip-off that Charles River was trying to move 1,000 monkeys from their facility in Houston, maybe even another facility, but certainly from their facility in Houston. They were going to truck the animals across the country to Dulles Airport and then fly them out of Dulles. And so we had people at kind of every point along this kind of domestic line kind of giving us this tip-off. And once we got confirmation that it was Charles River, because initially we just heard that it was a company. And once we heard that Charles River was not going to need a re-export permit, we knew that this was absolutely tied to Charles River's acknowledgement back in early or mid-February that they were under subpoena by the Department of Justice, and that a number of their shipments had been denied clearance by Fish and Wildlife Service. So PETA did what only PETA can do, which is to let everyone know. And so within the space of 12 or 18 hours, 40,000 emails and phone calls went out to Fish and Wildlife Service from PETA supporters. We contacted every stakeholder we could find, and directing everyone at Fish and Wildlife, asking Fish and Wildlife to stop. Do not let Charles River move these monkeys. Do not let these animals out of this country. PETA, working with Born Free, we're working to get these animals into sanctuary.
And Born Free is a legitimate sanctuary that would take in the monkeys, and they could live out their lives not in a lab, but in an environment that is close to their natural habitat.
Exactly. So these monkeys, these 1,000 animals, these are young animals. These were animals who were probably, a year, 2, maybe 3 years old. Again, they were ripped from their families, ripped from the forest. They've been in kind of individual cages, we believe, for several months. There was no happy ending. There's no going back to Cambodia and these monkeys kind of gambling through the forest. That can't happen. Ecologically, socially, behaviorally, these animals can't do that, but we can take responsibility and give them a kind of a humane life here in the US. And this is where Born Free USA, the sanctuary in Texas, basically answered PETA's call. I mean, we were knocking on every door in this country, and the sanctuary community is not big. The sanctuary community is always trying to scrape money together, but Born Free is a macaque sanctuary predominantly. So Born Free knows these monkeys. They know what these monkeys are capable of. They know that if you give them space, you give them each other. You give them the basic necessities, food, veterinary care. These macaques can actually grow old together and have a semblance of life. And Born Free USA wants to do that. Problem is that these animals are caught up in these investigations that, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, and Fish and Wildlife Service are caught up in this investigation. And Charles River is choosing not to do the right thing. To Charles River, these 1,000 monkeys are $30 million worth of monkey meat.
Well, what would Charles River do with them if they were allowed to keep them? They would go into the whole testing protocol.
Well, Charles River can't keep these monkeys. That's the thing. So these 1,000 monkeys, when they were imported in a number of shipments, Fish and Wildlife did something called they did not clear the CITES permit. So these monkeys travel on a CITES permit. And we've talked about the CITES permit before. Every animal that moves around the world, every monkey that's imported comes in on one of these. And you have to label correctly on them, whether or not these animals were captive or wild caught. These animals came in on a falsified CITES permit. So they can never be used for experimentation in the US.
So these monkeys are really worthless to Charles River, really, because of some bureaucratic paperwork error.
No, I'm sorry. This was not a bureaucratic paperwork error. This was an intentional act by this industry to falsely label, to mislead the authorities as to pretend that these were captive bred monkeys when everyone knew that these were wild caught monkeys. So Charles River thought that they were too big. They thought they could actually just jam this one down, the regulatory body's throats. And Fish and Wildlife stood up and said, no, to their absolute credit. These monkeys can never be used as they exist right now in the US. But what Charles River wants to do is to re-launder them. They're going to pick these monkeys up, send them back to Cambodia, shake, recycle, repackage, and drop them back into the pipeline.
So this is like going back over the monkey trail because someone screwed up and they didn't have they misidentified them. So they're forcing these monkeys to go back. And is it easy for these monkeys to go back and then start the process again?
It's monkey money laundering. It's just another way to kind of repackage these animals. There is no way to show that these were captive bred monkeys. Fish and Wildlife would not have denied to clear the shipment if they thought that they were traveling on an accurate CITES permit.
So in the end, what they're really trying to do is trying to save their investment that they paid all this money for the monkeys, and they're really grasping at straws. And then once they've been through this thing once, it's got to be very difficult to say, oh, these are the right, this is the right identity of the monkey, or
Right.
these monkeys are now good.
There's only one choice for these animals, and that choice is sanctuary here in the US. And Charles River and the government who let them in, they have to be held responsible for this. They need to step up and pay for the lifetime care of these animals, because if they go back, this is what happens. They get loaded up, they get sent back to Cambodia, they get unloaded, they go to a farm. They're then going to be trucked over the border to a place like Vietnam or Thailand. And again, they're going to be kind of turned around, kind of tumbled a little bit. And then they're going to be kind of, they're going to be trying to send out of those countries. And whether it'll be to the US, let's hope not, but they may be going into China, or they may be they try to get them into Europe under false papers. But it's these animals they're caught in the system, and they're here on US soil right now. This is an endangered species of primate, and the US public should be screaming from the top of every roof at Charles River and at Fish and Wildlife and at DOJ saying, we will take responsibility for these animals. We will care for these animals, allow these animals to go into sanctuary, make that happen.
So where the monkeys are now is they're in this strange negotiation where Charles River has them, and they want to send them back, but they're prevented from sending them back. I imagine it's safe to say time is of the essence here. Where are we right now? Are the monkeys at a point where they're ready to be offloaded onto a plane and sent back to Cambodia? Are we really at that precipice where either they go back on a plane or they go into sanctuary?
We are at that precipice, and we actually, it's literally, we're standing right there. And so the pressure has to be on Charles River and Fish and Wildlife and DOJ to say, take the action, do what you need to do to get these animals into sanctuary. Because, as you said, these are commodity for Charles River. They want to protect their investment. Again, they know this is $30 million worth of monkey right here. And so they want to find some other buyer for these animals. We don't know obviously we have our ears and eyes everywhere right now. And if the moment that we get any word that there's movement at any of Charles River's facilities to try to get these monkeys back on trucks to fly them out of the country, we'll do the same thing we did last week. And we will put people right there. We will do everything we can to make sure this doesn't happen, that we've got these eyes on them. But the choice it's the government's choice right now. It's Charles River could do this. They could honor what they just describe as, their integrity, their commitment, their social responsibility. They have a responsibility to these animals. They can't use them. They cannot use them as they are here. Charles River could say, all right, we screwed up. These monkeys should have never left. They're here in our house right now. We're going to send them to sanctuary.
Yeah. And so what can listeners do to make sure that the right choice is made by Charles River? And what can listeners do to help PETA as PETA tries to make sure that Charles River does the right thing?
So we've been sending out email alerts on a regular basis. We've been sending out texting action alerts to our supporters and asking them to reach out directly to Fish and Wildlife Service, to the management authority there, and to put pressure on Fish and Wildlife and let Fish and Wildlife know that, our taxpayer dollars are involved in this. We have a responsibility to these animals. We want you to keep these animals here and send them to sanctuary. So continuing to answer those email alerts, answer those action alerts, make the phone calls, send the emails, keep the pressure up. Last time I looked, I think we were, 65, 70,000 actions have been taken. let's hit 100,000. Let's hit 500,000. Let everyone in this country hear our voice, because no one's listening to these macaques right now. So we have to speak for them.
Yeah. And if it goes on, I guess the longer it goes on, that's better for the monkeys because they're not going back to Cambodia. But is there a time limit? I mean, if we say time is of the essence, how long can this really go on, this standoff?
It's a government agency battling a multi-billion-dollar corporation who wants these monkeys. But every day that these are, again, I can't emphasize, these are young animals. These are animals who are still malleable. There's still a chance that if we get them into sanctuary, that they can form these social groups and live out a good life. But every day that they're sitting inside one of these Charles River facilities that we know where deadly diseases are circulating in these colonies, it increases the likelihood that they will be exposed. The stress in there means that, basically their immune systems, their psychological well-being is chipped away every day. So every day matters on this.
Is there any doubt in your mind that if PETA loses this battle and the monkeys are shipped back to Cambodia or back to Asia or wherever, if they're just sent back, it guarantees that these monkeys are doomed?
If these monkeys go back to Cambodia, they die. They either die quickly, they die slowly, they die. No monkey makes it out of the experimentation industry. No long-tailed macaque makes it out alive. And so that's why these 1,000 are so critical. These 1,000 who are here on our soil, where we have the ability to actually give them a happy ending. We have to do that, because that will be the first. These 1,000 go back to Cambodia, they will die the most horrible death.
Lisa Jones-Engel, PETA primate expert, thank you very much again for being on the PETA podcast.
Thank you, Emil.
Lisa Jones-Engel, PETA primatologist, on the case of Charles River Labs and the 1,000 monkeys. Get the latest call to action at PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. That's EMIL AMOK, or see my vlog at amok.com, or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's aaldef.org/blog. And if you're in New York City around March, toward the end of March, see me in the off-Broadway production The Conductor. Ishmael reads The Conductor at Theater for the New City on First Avenue. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.